This is an FIE Composer 2.0 help video. The main topic is the camera, and this specific video is on the setup of the camera. So we'll head out into Composer, where I have something set up already. And we'll just take a look at the working set. And we've got walls and a seat and a person and one piece, which is a camera piece, which I've called Angle A, just for the sake of things. Camera pieces are like any other piece. You can just add them. I'll go out into the pieces and click add, and we'll add a camera head. All right, and we'll get a second one, and then I can take it and duplicate it and rename it pretty much whatever I want. It's no different than anything else. So I'll just get rid of these because we don't need them. We're just going to focus on one for now. But that's how you get them in here. And if you go into that piece and check the manipulation, basically you have two. You have an SRT and a viewfinder. Now, a second video is going to focus a little bit more on setting up shots and framing with cameras. But this one is really going to focus a lot more on camera setup and the technical aspects of the camera. And the reason for that is because Composer's core functionality, most important thing that it does is it creates a technically accurate environment for setting up shots and figuring out things like which lens you need to get the shot that you want, and where exactly on the floor you can put down a mark and then set up the camera to get the angle you want. That effectively a Composer brings aspects of what is referred to as technical planning to something that's more like the storyboard, is something that's more in line with the storyboard process, or that, in the storyboard process itself. But in order to accomplish that, in order to be accurate, in order to be able to actually depend on the ability to put marks on the ground and know that you're going to get the angle that you already pre-planned and it's going to look the way that it should, you have to be very technically accurate about the camera itself when you put it in the scene. Okay? So it's not as simple as just drop a camera in and then choose a lens, because you need to know things about what is the film back on the camera, what is the size of the film back, and how does it work in order to get this correct. So we're just going to go through some of the things that you can set up here in the camera as far as just getting the right camera in there in order to work with it. And we'll just start on the left here with aspect ratio, okay, which you can get to with the A key, or you can just tap on it. And it brings up a little window for setting that. Now, right now, you'll see at the top it says the ratio is 1.85, which is actually one of the presets. It's a DCI flat. But to change it, to something like the old NTSC television, which is 133, you can just tap on the NTSC button, and the lines sort of get bigger. In fact, I probably have to, if I just turn this vertically, you'll see that that it's a typical 4:3 image. And then we can also go 16:9, which is HD TV, DCI flat, which is 185, which is digital cinema 185, DCI scope, which is sometimes referred to as 240, but it's actually 239, which is again digital cinema CinemaScope. IMAX, which is 1.43, and 35mm still frame, which is actually an aspect ratio of 1.5 classically. And all these are good, important presets that you're most likely to find, and so that's why they're here, to make it just easy and you don't have to memorize numbers. But if you have a special camera, maybe you're shooting it with a red camera, and a red camera can shoot all kinds of crazy aspect ratios, including things like 2:1, that you can also just hit the enter button and just put in a value. So if I was shooting on a red in 2:1, I can just put it in, and there you have it. Now it's set up for 2. For aspect ratio of 2. It's that easy. So it's infinitely flexible, but it also has useful presets. And this is the kind of thing where, realistically, you can't set a frame and you can't plan out a shot unless you know what aspect ratio you're shooting in. So the first thing that any storyboard artist or previs artist probably is asking the director of photography and the director of the film before they even start work is, what aspect ratio are we shooting? Is this a 185 show, or a 240 show, or 16:9? What are we even drawing into? So that's here and able to be set because it's really important. And it's moving right along. We're going to skip capture image because that's really much further down the line. Lens, or L, It's a very similar window. You see it's designed effectively the same. Right now we have a focal length of 27 millimeters or a 27 millimeter lens. I have presets in here for what is a fairly normal set of primes that you might find. Typical numbers. They're not all in here, but a 12, a 14, an 18, 24, 27, 35, 50, 80, 100, and 150 are pretty typical prime numbers that you might prime lenses that you'd likely find in some general lens package. And of course, because there's all kinds of lenses out there with every millimeter value you could think of, we also have the ability to just enter it. So if you specifically have an 18.5 millimeter lens, you can just set it that way as well. Okay. Typically, while I'm talking about setup here, and you might start. A lens choice might be part of a setup, but ultimately a lens is really part of framing. So we're going to go through lenses again a little bit when we get into just framing up shots, because it's something that you're likely to change constantly. All right, moving right along, we have film back, which we'll click on here. Now, a lot of people don't know what a film back really is. And so I'm going to expand this a little bit to a lesson about film backs, because the film back is the size of the film behind the lens that's capturing the image. Some people in photography think of this as crop factor. But it's very similar. The next question you ask after you figure out what aspect ratio the project is in, if you're trying to be accurate about these things and give people real lenses, you're going to have to figure out what the film back is for the project, what camera they're actually shooting on, what the sensor size is, or what the size of the film back behind there is. Otherwise, all the lenses are going to be completely off, and the framing is going to be wrong. So this is, again, something that's really important to get down early in the process. And so if you just look at some of my presets here, I have Academy camera and Academy projector, and you notice that there is a slight difference between those two things. And this is also something that a lot of people don't necessarily fully understand. A lot of cinematographers actually don't even understand that. There are actually two different gates or film back sizes when you're shooting just Academy film, which is that there's the Academy camera aperture, which is 0.866 inches, which is what the camera actually shoots theoretically. I mean, forgetting a sound stripe and that the left side is sometimes cut off. A gate that captures the appropriate image for camera aperture for Academy is 0.866 inches, but that's not what's projected. In fact, the projector gate is a little smaller. It crops in a little bit, which is why we push in a little bit when I select the Academy projector size, which is 0.825 inches. And so when you're framing up shots, and you say you put a framing chart in the camera, and so you notice what reticle lines on the actual glass reticle in the camera that you're using, I realize that you should be framing for Academy projector because that's what the audience is going to see in most cases. That's what you should be framing for if you're thinking aesthetically, but you should be protecting for Academy camera, which is similar to the way that television is sometimes shot. And a lot of times people don't really fully understand this. And I've seen a lot of previs, professional, feature film previs, where they do all their work in Academy camera. And then, when they actually go and shoot and use that information, it turns out that everything's a little bit tighter, when they see it projected than they expected. It's not much, but it's enough that it's something you should be aware of, and that's why I have both presets available. We also have Super 35 camera and likewise Super 35 projector, which works off of those same ratios. It's the same amount of push, but that's for a Super 35 film back, which is typically a 0.98 inches across. We have the IMAX film back, which obviously is dramatically different, and the lens numbers that you use on an IMAX are sometimes very unintuitive, but we can model that here for you. We have a 35 millimeter still film back, which is actually film sized, what an actual piece of film is. We have an APS-C Canon, which is what a lot of your Canon digital SLRs are. Pretty much anything short of a 5D Mark II is usually an APS-C Canon size sensor. So you digital SLR types have your sort of Canon film back in here. We also have an APS-C setting for Nikon, Pentax, and Sony because there is a slight difference in the crop between Canon versus the other manufacturers, so that's available for you guys as well. Then we've got an MFT or Micro Four Thirds film back as well for those of you who are doing sort of digital SLR style work. We're using micro four thirds backs and sensors. And as you might imagine, all of these you could just click enter size and actually type in a custom size. So again, if you have I would say a RED camera, which can actually, depending on what resolution you're shooting, it can have completely different sizes for its film back. If you can get the information from RED or calculate it from the publicly available information, you can type it in here and use it. So we don't, the presets are useful, but we do not put handcuffs on you. The other thing that we've got in here, though, that's different is what we refer to as the match, which you'll see as I click around here, they get set. So Academy camera and Academy projector are horizontal matches, as are Super 35 horizontal matches. But when I go to IMAX, it becomes a vertical match, and that's because a lot of these formats can use different aspect ratios. And so if like I can shoot Super 35. And right now, let me just go grab my aspect ratio window here. Right now I'm shooting Super 35 with a ratio of 2:0, but I can do a 16:9, a 1:3, and you'll notice it just moves the the top and bottom lines up and down, and the horizontal lines stay the same, which is to say it's matching the width horizontally, and it's the vertical part, therefore, that is variable when you change aspect ratios. But IMAX. And in these classic film formats, the reason is because the film is what's known as vertical pull, which is it's moving vertically, and the width of the film, which always stays the same, always is the thing that you're measuring on. Comparatively, though, IMAX is actually a horizontal pull format, and so it matches vertically, which is to say, if I change my aspect ratio. You notice the whole image is changing sizes in this mode because what it's doing is it's keeping the vertical framing the same, and therefore it's the width that's changing dramatically, and so it's adjusting that appropriately. And 35 millimeter still film, we sort of do the same thing. We do a horizontal match just by default, though again you can toggle it. So if we want to do a 35 millimeter still and then we want to, well, actually we can't really do that because it's based on the film width. What is a good one? Because 35 mils still is horizontal pull. That's why it's vertical. But if you want to create some format that doesn't exist, which is say an IMAX, 1.9 inches, but it's not a vertical match, it's a horizontal match, you can toggle it. Or whatever weird format you're creating, it's available to be set. So. But the most important thing to catch here is that you have to get this right if you expect your millimeter lenses to be correct, because you notice this whole time, my focal length is still 18.5, and an 18.5 millimeter lens at Super 35 looks like that, but an 18.5 millimeter lens on IMAX looks like that. And it's all of these are having a dramatic effect. So you have to get your film back right, and it has to be part of your setup if you intend to be accurate in your framing and be able to tell people what lens you actually drew. Okay, so that's the film back. And the rest of these are really things that can be taken care of when we talk about framing up shots after you get through your setup. So the last thing to just point out here is that, if you do a lot of if your film is effectively if your camera is effectively as a preset, that you can just go in here and click a bunch of preset buttons to sort of set up your camera each time. Maybe it's good enough to just use the preset buttons. If your camera setup is complex enough that you keep having to remember numbers and type them in, or that you just get tired of opening all these windows and remembering to set the presets for the film back and all that one and the aspect ratio every time, you can just create an empty scene with just your camera in it, and you can set this stuff up, and then you can just save out that scene. You would just save and save to asset, and just save it to your project. You call it like your base camera or your preset camera, and then rather than when you want to add a camera to a setup that you're doing, rather than use the pieces menu and go and just adding a new camera head here, instead you can just go to your scenes and you can just merge a scene in and go grab your camera, your camera scene, or your base camera scene from the project. And that's a good way to sort of have a preset camera that's got all your setup set correctly for your project and never really have to worry about if you messed up. If you just make it a habit to always save out your camera to its own scene and just merge it in as many times as you need to just keep adding camera heads to the scene. That's a good way to store all of your custom settings and bring them in as many times as you need to. Okay, so that's the basic sort of technical aspects of how you set up a camera. The next video I'm going to make is going to focus more on how to use the camera creatively to set up shots and how you would really work with it once you've got it set up. Okay, so that's that.